All right, in today's video reference, we're going to learn finally how to solve equations that have fractions, and we're literally just going to work on clearing the fractions. So what does it mean to clear a fraction? It just means to get rid of the fractions because they're difficult to deal with. Step number one, whenever clearing fractions, is you always distribute first to remove all the parentheses from the equation. After you've distributed, you have to look for the least common denominator of all the fractions, and then multiply each term of the equation by the LCD. So if you remember, we just learned, like, for example, if you have 3/4, if we want to multiply, say the LCD here is 12, for example. Remember, we put the 12 at the top here. Can someone tell me what this would equal? So hopefully you would say 12 times 3 is 36, and 36 divided by 4. This would clear to just be 9. So let's go ahead and then you can just solve it usually using the normal multi-step equations that we've always been doing. So again, just each example, we're literally just clearing the fractions for now, not worrying about solving them. So in this first example, number 1, raise your hand. Is there any distributive property? No. So we need to look for the LCD. So what's the least common denominator that 3 and 2 go into? Hopefully you said 6. So now let's just rewrite the fraction equation here. 1/3 plus m equals -3/2. So now what I want to do is multiply everything by the number 6. So like we did before, I'm going to put little 6's above all of these terms. So every number gets multiplied by 6. So here, we can get in the habit of cross simplifying if you want. So cross this out, and then this would become a 1, and this would become a 2. Same thing here. If we cross simplify it here, what would these two numbers become? This would become a 1, and this would become a 3. So now if you kind of go through, 2 times 1 is 2, divided by 1 is just 2, plus 6 times m would be what? 6m equals 3 times 3 is 9, but it's -9, and then over 1 would just be -9. So that is this same equation written here in a clear fraction form. All right, let's go on to the next one. So here we're looking at this equation. The one thing that they did was they changed that mixed number into an improper fraction here. So raise your hand. Is there any distributive property here? The answer is no. So now we got to look for the LCD in step 2. What's the least common denominator between 3, 2, and 6? Hopefully you put 6 again, right? So 6 goes into all of those. So now we can do it over here to the side. There's room. So we're gonna multiply all those numbers by a 6. So we'll put 6 again at the top. 6, 6, and 6. All right, so first thing I'll do, I can cross simplify. This would become a 1, and this would become a what? 2. Cross simplify this for me. A 1 and a 3. And then here, this would just 6 goes into 6 one time. So they both becomes 1. So now that we multiply down and then divide, this would just be, who can tell me what the first term would clear to be? 4x plus, how about the second term? 3x. And then obviously here, this is just plus 24. And then this is equal to 1 times 31 is 31, divided by 1 is 31. So we can write that down here for our cleared fraction. Our cleared equation would be 4x plus 3x plus 24 equals 31. All right, last example is example 3. So here, do we have any distributing to do? The answer is yes. So we have to remember how to multiply a fraction by a fraction. So hopefully you remember you just do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So anybody want to try to distribute this? 2/5 y and then minus 8 over 25 equals 3 over 10. All right, so now we need to come up with the least common denominator. What's the least common denominator that goes into 5, 25, and 10? Yeah, it's actually 50. So now we're going to multiply each term by the number 50. Now you're going to see how cross simplifying comes in very handy. So here, anybody want to cross simplify here? This becomes a 1, and this becomes a 10. How about this cross simplifying? This becomes a 2. This becomes a 1. And then last but not least, this becomes a 5. And this becomes 1. So now when I cross simplify, or when I multiply 10 times 2, anybody want to clear this term for me? It's 20y minus 2 times 8, 16 here. And the last one would be just plain old 50.